You're listening to the Simply Strategic Ministry podcast hosted by Patrick Weichel. Our goal is to help you grow your ministry through simple strategies and scalable systems. With over a decade of ministry experience, we know that these strategies and systems will bring value to you as a leader and to your entire team.
Hey, thank you for joining again for the Simply Strategic Ministry podcast. I'm joined today with new friend and special guest, Justin Knowles. He's over all student ministry and kids ministry at Sandals Church in California. Man, I'm going to be honest. We'll get into this in today's podcast, but I had you on the podcast. We have some mutual connections. I kind of saw you. I think we were at an event in Tennessee, or you were there before us or something. And I was like, hey, I'll need to meet this guy, connect with this guy. But you posted something on Instagram about student ministry and leaders. We will get to that. But I was like, we got to get this guy on the podcast. So, dude, thanks for taking time because you run your own podcast. So tell us a little bit as we jump in, who you are, what you do, talk about your podcast. And then, man, let's talk simple strategies that are going to lead to scalable growth about leaders.
Sweet. Nutshell, Justin. Director of Kids and Youth, Sandals Church in California, based in Riverside, California, Inland Empire. What's up? We have 14 locations, and I get to oversee all of our kids and youth pastors at all those locations. And it's a blast, man. They're fun, great team. Love working with them. God's doing some great stuff, especially in the post-pandemic life. And we're just excited about it. Married, 2 kids, 2 boys. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. I love them, and they're insane. Been married for 10 years and then been in ministry, student ministry specific, for 16. So that's who I am. Yeah, and then I run a podcast as well. It's called Youth Ministry Hacks. And, we've been around a little bit longer than you guys.
Yeah, just a little bit.
We just hit 107 episodes. And so me and my buddy Sean, who's the student director over at Flatirons Church in Colorado, and me and him just talk ministry, very simple, like this, like practical hacks. Here's what we do. Here's what we're thinking. Stuff you could try to do tomorrow. So you could go check that out.
No, dude. Yeah, we're definitely going to link to that in the show notes, and great podcast for you to connect to if you're looking exactly what Justin just said. If you're looking something you can do on a Thursday after debriefing Wednesday night, that podcast is full of stuff. It'd be great for you to listen to, or you and your team, whatever you might lead. And so, dude, 14 campuses, that's a lot. Kids and students. We were just talking about before we started recording 1,800 students, man, that's a ton. So you have your full fair share of probably staff leaders, but then also serve team, volunteer leaders, whatever you may choose to call them. And I just kind of want to start by unpacking this idea a little bit and hear your take on it before we kind of get into the context of the post that you put up on Instagram. But I've heard it said, I don't know who it's original to, but that everything rises and falls on the quantity and quality of leaders. That if you want to do more, and if you want to do more better, you need more leaders who can do more. What's your experience been with that? I mean, 16 years in next gen ministry right now, overseeing all these campuses with student ministry. What do you think about quantity and quality of leaders as it relates to just simple strategy and scalable growth and ministry health in general?
Yeah, I was talking to one of our new hires at one of our campuses the other day. And one of the things I let her know when she first got hired was, hey, the guy before you, he moved up into like the number 2 position at the campus. And so he stepped out of youth ministry. It's like, hey, he was loved. He was a great leader, and he built his team. And it's not everybody on that team is going to be your team, and you're going to lose people, and that's okay. And so part of why I even think about that is first, because one of the stories I told her is before I came to Sandals, I was at a church for 10 years, and I inherited a whole team, 36 leaders. Within the first 6 months is casting new vision. Here's the direction, kind of talking with people. I grew the team from 36 to 6. And
wrong trajectory there.
Yeah, well, and I use that wording specifically because growing it to 6 means I had 6 bought in people. Who under the new vision, under the new direction, and I could do way more with 6 bought in, fully ready to go people than I can with 36 bodies.
Yeah,
and so so part of that, yeah, quantity is great when you set the new vision, you set the new direction, you give out clear wins, leaders feel known and seen. That will come, but usually when you're starting at first, and especially it's like you want to get your core people,
Yeah.
and I'd rather have some quality leaders, because then you could build you could build your systems and your onboarding process to weed out anyone who's not supposed to be there or doesn't catch the
Right.
vision. And then it as you onboard new people, it develops quality people on top of quantity of leaders. So I would say I lean towards quality first, even if it shrinks it, because I could do way more with bought in people. And then as you grow it, like as you onboard and set up the systems in place, then you could have better leaders as you
Yeah.
grow it.
That's good. So you're saying, all right, whether you're starting at a new church or you've been in a church for a long time and you're thinking about, okay, Pat said this thing about quantity and quality of leaders. You're saying it's important to start first with the quality. And just even kind of what you said, I can do more with 6 bought in leaders than I can with 36. The question then there is, if I can like poke at this idea, is like, okay, you said you can have an onboarding system that creates quality of leaders, but what about, like you just said, if you inherit them, or what if you've been at a church and you find yourself with not quality leaders? How do you figure out what a quality leader is? Like, what's that system? What's the strategy for looking back and saying, all right, who's crushing it and maybe who isn't?
Yeah. So again, I'll just tell you our context, because this is what we did as we developed our own system and onboarding stuff. It actually happened during COVID. We kind of restructured what a leader does, how they do it. I think part of it, like number one, would be like define what a winning leader does.
Yeah,
Because
what's your ideal leader look like?
yeah, like everybody wants to know if they're winning. And so, can your leaders articulate if they're being successful or not, right? And so part of that is what we did during COVID is when we weren't, I don't know what it was like out in Texas, but in California, people got
Different.
crazy, and like everything shut down. We shut down for like 29 weeks, and then groups didn't meet for a long time as well, in person. On campus, but groups met outside. Like if it was like, hey, if you feel comfortable, do your stuff. And we saw that some groups were like killing it,
Yeah.
and then some groups weren't. And so we made a list of all of the leaders in small groups that were killing it across all of our campuses. We asked them what they were doing to grow and to like what we would consider winning. And all of them came back with at least 4 of the same ideas. And so for us, it's we call them the 4 Fs. That's like that's like the 4 Fs, the 4 wins in our youth ministry as a leader. And that's every one of them were having a faith conversation. They weren't just hanging out. They were always pointing it back to Jesus.
Yeah.
Number 2 is they were always following up with the new kid, following up with a conversation, a prayer request, a need. There was a family connection, meaning that like they were connecting with the parents or guardians on a regular basis. And there's what we call fellowship plus, meaning is we had the Wednesday night gathering, but they were the ones hanging out outside of Wednesday nights doing life with. And so we just said, okay, if this is what all of our leaders are doing that are killing it, why don't we just make that the standard as new leaders are coming on, saying this is the expectation from the beginning.
Yeah.
And then training everybody else to say, hey, everybody, we've been kind of not clear on how to win. Now we're training everybody and saying, here's what our 4 wins are. If you are killing it in our ministry as a leader, if you want to know if you're doing the right things, can you answer yes to these 4 questions? Are you having faithful conversations? Are you following up? Are you making connections with families? And are you hanging outside of Wednesday nights? Like, those are the 4 wins. And it's been cool to see leaders jump on that, take that. And there's been like initiatives that we've done to like enhance those things that we could talk about if you want to get into. But now like all of our leaders, it's very clear they know if they're winning or not. Right?
Yeah, I would love to talk about the initiatives, because in my brain, I'm thinking about, okay, COVID, probably different response in California. Texas is its own country, it feels like. But, we did groups over Zoom, and I remember I was fresh into the ministry, and not in general, but at my context right now. And I had this leader who was like, "Hey man, my group is struggling. I'm just realizing now I don't even know my kids' last names. So
Mm.
it's hard for me to connect with them over Zoom because not only do I not know their last names, I don't have their cell phone numbers. So maybe I'm not like a good leader." And then navigating that conversation to not be like condemning and be like, "You're right, you're a terrible leader, you suck," but instead being like, "Hey, here's how you can be a better leader. Like, here's how you can be the leader that we need you to be." So yeah, I want to talk about those systems because in the process that you just mentioned, because for me, when you start doing that, and I've done that in ministry too, when you start identifying, okay, well, here's what a quality leader looks like, what would our ideal leader do? What would they say? Those things you just said. There are gonna be people who are like, whoa, 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 you just shifted the job description on me. That is not what I was asked to do. And now
Yep.
kind of like what a win is has changed. So yeah, I would love to speak for you to speak on what's that training like once you've identified, okay, here's what it means to win. How do you lead that change in your ministry without driving a bunch of people away? Or is driving people away just natural and a good thing that people need to embrace?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to remember too, like anytime that you do any sort of change in your ministry, like it shouldn't be just like a sudden left turn where everybody, like you see that TikTok challenge where everybody's like holding water and they make
Yeah.
like the sharp left turn and then the water spills everywhere. Like that's not what we want to do in our ministry, right? I think part of it is like, hey, at least for me, this is my tactic, and that's what I try to coach our team to do if they're making a change within their like current ministry. Is
Yeah.
like I would be meeting with people. Like chances are you've been thinking about it for a while. You've been gathering information. You've kind of like it's not fresh for you anymore. But the moment that it comes out of your mouth, everybody's hearing it for the first time, and they're not ready. They haven't processed it as long as you have.
Yeah.
And so part of that is like, do you have meetings with your leaders one-on-one? Like I would just start throwing out questions. Hey, I've been thinking about blank. Tell me about, what do you think about this?
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I've been seeing. Here's what I've been doing, here's what I'm kind of thinking about making, especially with like the key stakeholders, big volunteers that you have in your ministry, like the ones who have been around, who have been loyal. Asking that, because if you could get your key volunteers on board, because guess what's going to happen when you communicate it out
Yeah.
is most likely your volunteers won't come to you. They're going to go to some of the other volunteers. And if you could get your main volunteers on board and excited that they're going to be like, they're going to help you cast the vision for what's coming later. Because usually that's what happens. Usually you wish they came to you directly, but that's not realistically, they're not. They're going to go to like the key leaders. What do you think about this? And if they're excited because you've cast the vision, it helps like spread that a little bit more, and eases some of that tension. And then part of that, again, like it's asking everybody's opinion. It's asking, ultimately you're the leader and you need to make a decision. But like, even if you make a decision that goes against what someone thinks, most of the time people go, well, he actually like came to me personally, asked
Yeah.
me my thoughts and opinions on this. I could see where he was going. And hopefully they could get behind. Maybe it's a bigger ask, right? Because I would say that in our church, asking someone to lead a small group is one of the biggest asks in our church, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because it's a discipleship over a year, right? Like that's like what we're hoping to see. That's a big thing. And if they can't, to answer your question, it's okay to onboard people. I think that there should be normal, just how like you and I probably have yearly reviews for our jobs. I
Yep.
feel like we should have that within our student ministry and our volunteers, in the sense of like, we should be meeting up with our leaders regularly, asking them. I ask 3 questions. If you want practical, here's 3 questions. How are you? When we meet up with them, how are you doing? Because
Mm-hmm.
I care about you as a person, not as a pawn, not as a thing in my
Yeah.
ministry, not as a doer. Like, how are you? How are you doing in your role? So that's like asking them, like, hey, how's your small group? How are you doing with everything? We made this change. How are you feeling about it? Blah, 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 and then
Yeah.
what can I do to make what you do better? And so that
Oh,
allows
that's
them
good.
to speak into you, because candor goes both ways. Feedback goes both ways. And so it gives them an opportunity to share where they're struggling and how you could set them up better. And as you're having these conversations, I'm not doing well and I'm struggling in my role and I think you're doing a crappy job. like that's kind of like red flags for you to say, hey, ask a question like, is this a season for us, maybe for you to maybe start serving somewhere else? How can I help you do that? Can we maybe let's maybe take a break for 6 months and then let's meet up for coffee again and kind of reevaluate where you're at. Like it kind of gives you these opportunities for you to kind of like see where they're at. Again, another practical thing, and I'll promise I'll shut up and I'll stop talking, is like I would sit with my crew and I would rate our volunteers red, yellow, green. Like, and just kind of like, here's where I know that this person's green, they're bought in, they're ready to go. Yellow is, I don't know. I feel like I probably should have a coffee conversation with them. I think they're here, but I don't know. And then red is like, man, I think they're on their way out. And so, kind of like giving an assessment. And then when I go into a meeting with them, I like let them know like, hey, I have you at a yellow. Am I wrong? Yeah. Like, am I wrong in that? Like, can you help me? Like, because here's what I'm seeing. If our wins are this and you're not doing any of them, like where am I missing anything? Are you doing something that maybe I'm not seeing? Mm-hmm. Like, can you help me out here? Like, where are you at? And most of the time they'll go like, actually, I've done this, this, and this. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like, you should post about that more, or you should tell me more. Or it's, you know what? You're right. I haven't done any of those things. And it kind of gives you like a nice off ramp into a conversation about what does their involvement look like in the ministry. So
yeah, that's really good. Man, that's really good. I think there's so much gold in there. And one of the biggest things is, I think you touched on it and I experienced it with my first year here, is, man, most of the time, serve team, volunteers, dream team, whatever you call them, they don't want to make the decision. They just want to be heard, Mm-hmm. And so like, we have to do a good job in what you just said, not like fast switching on them and throwing them around. But at the same time, like if they feel like you just asked, hey, what do you think about this? Or, hey, I feel like we need to make this change and here's why, and just giving them a platform to hear it and speak into it, most of the time it's going to be fine. Or it's going to go a lot smoother and a lot easier than you thought it was going to if you just ride in on your, change horse and are like, all right, here we go. We're changing everything. You guys suck. You need to be better. All mm-hmm. that stuff doesn't really go over so well. I love that you meet with your leaders and you do that kind of thing of like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Am I off? Because I feel like sometimes what gets us into a hard place with the quality of our leaders is that in church world, we don't want to have confrontation. Or we think like, oh, because they're unpaid volunteers, we don't need to coach them, or we don't need to review them or meet with them. And really, this is a good segue into kind of your post on Instagram. But if you want better quality of leader, I think one of the most strategic things you can do is meet with your leaders more than you meet with your students. And you kind of posted around this idea, and I would love for you to just kind of take off on it.
Yeah, I think that's the lure and the trap of youth ministry as a youth pastor, and if someone in like the lead position, is that you got into it because you want to hang out with students and you want to help introduce them to Jesus and the life-changing ways of his teachings and the way that he lived, and the Holy Spirit transforming their life from the inside out. And you're like, that's why I got into it. And then you actually get into it and you actually realize that if you do that all the time, you're actually limiting yourself and limiting to help students see that at a bigger scale. Like I think that maybe, that's why small groups work so well. If you have 10 to 15 students and you're the only person on staff or the volunteer staff member or whatever, that's great. You could probably stay there and you probably stay there healthfully, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's probably good. But if you're looking to grow, expand, to reach more and more students, you have to, like, I wish I got it earlier. I don't think I did that until I was about until I got hired, probably like 5 years into youth ministry. I got hired. I worked at Saddleback Church, and that's, big youth ministry, big church. Yeah. And there was, I was overseeing, 1,200 students in small groups. And I'm going like, how do I, as a small groups pastor, do that? And you have to depend on leaders and train leaders in order to do things well. And so that like really helped me put it into perspective, even at like, not even at a Saddleback, but even at, if you're going from 20 students to 40 students, like you can't minister to everybody the same. Right. And so what happens usually, I think the most effective youth pastors and youth ministers are the ones who spend more time with leaders than they do with students. That doesn't mean that I don't hang out with students,
Right.
but that means that my time of investment changes because I want to be more effective. And if I could get more people to think like I do, ministry wise, and to disciple people like I do, then I will be more effective in reaching more and more students over. And that's like where people, they I feel miss it because they love students so much that they have to be best friends with everybody. And that's not the case
Yeah.
all the time.
Well, it's also just not strategic. So, like, if, I had 10 high school guys and I wanted to spend all my time with them, but I have a high school ministry of 160, okay, one, that doesn't really make sense. But two, I can only replicate myself into these 10 high school guys. But if I replicate myself into 10 high school leaders, they all have groups of 10 to 15. So now I'm replicating myself into 10 leaders who are then going to be some representation of the vision or the calling or even the competencies that I have in those groups. And so now I'm affecting more by doing less. And it's like this weird, like, diminishing return thing that I feel like so many, student pastors have just failed to get yet or are struggling with, because it's like, hey, you got to work harder and you got to do more. And I'm not anti hard work or doing a lot of things, but I think like you could be more simple and strategic with who you're equipping, if you spend that time with those leaders. And like you said, it's not either or. It's not either you spend time with leaders or students. It can be both. And even sometimes, like, I got a kid right now, like, as I'm leading leaders, I'm like, hey, come watch me do this,
Mhm.
or as I'm leading an adult leader and I'm like, hey, I'm going to go hang out with some students and I want you to come follow me so that way you learn how not to be a weirdo around high school guys, you
Yep.
know? Um, and so you can even make those two things work together. And so you posted about that and I was like, gosh, dude, that's so good. Cause so many people are out here thinking the biggest way I grow my student ministry is just by spending time with students. And it's like, wrong. You can, but then it's only going to grow to your level of personal relational capacity. And when you leave, guess what? So are all those students. Or
Mhm.
you can spend time with leaders and replicate yourself in them. That's just so good. So sorry, I didn't mean to rant there, but dude, I'm so on board. I'm so on board with what you're saying.
Yeah.
That it's
Well,
just
I mean, think about it too. Like from a, I don't know what your audience is. If they're, my guess is single site, one person, they're the youth pastor. But take it from a guy who's at a multi-site campus who has the same passion as I did when I was at a single site, main youth pastor, only guy on staff. Like I wanted I can't do. You asked the question before we started recording, like, how do you choose what campus you go to? Like, if I was the only youth pastor and I was like, I'm not going to hire any youth pastor because I'm the main youth pastor, right? And I'm just going to go to one campus every week. Like that's not going to be effective. But when I could pour into my team of people and get everybody on the same page and vision and say like, here's what we're doing and how we disciple as a church and the ministry, like I affect way more students
yeah,
than I can. It's the same way that we have to think about, even if you're the single person at your campus, like think about that from your leader perspective. And I'll say Jesus did that. Jesus, he ministered to the crowd. He had his 12. Even within the 12, he had his 3.
yeah,
And then even within the 3, he had the one that he loved, right?
yeah,
And so like even he didn't, I don't think it was equal. It wasn't equal time with all
yeah,
the disciples.
yeah,
And so he poured into the ones that had that ability, and those 3 launched some pretty amazing things, like
yeah. No,
using them as like the base of the movement of Jesus,
yeah, no, that's good. Well, we've talked a little bit about quality of leaders. And if people have made it this far in the episode, they're probably like, no, that's fine. Shut up talking about that. I just need more. Like, I need more people with a pulse. I need more bodies in the room.
Yeah.
Um, you said something interesting. We use similar language. You talk about onboarding. And for me, I think what I've realized is when I say onboarding, I'm thinking about what most people think about recruiting. So
Mm-hmm.
getting a pool of people, getting them attracted to my ministry, in the door, trained, and sticking to the ministry. That's onboarding to me. And I think most people think about just recruiting, like, hey, I just want to recruit. But they miss the training process, the getting them to stick process. So I don't know, dude, talk a little bit about some of the strategies you've seen work to onboard leaders, to gather a group of people, pique their interest, set their heart on fire to the call, and then get them in the doors to where they don't just leave in 6 months, to where you're actually growing the quantity of the leaders that you have in your ministry.
Yeah, I think part of, like I said before, every leader wants to know how to win. They want to know what they're getting themselves into. They want to know if they're being successful. And I think before you start going on a recruiting rampage, like you have to look at the system in which you have with onboarding them in the first place. Like for us, it takes about a month to join the team.
Yeah.
So from application, there's the application, there's the like, it's pretty rigorous. Then there's the first sit down. We don't invite them to come to a Wednesday night first. Like you have an interview first and a background check first. And then we invite you to come after we feel like the first interview is like, yeah, this could possibly work. Then they come and shadow for 2 to 3 weeks, sit in a group, partner them up with another veteran leader who's great so that they can see what a great leader does. After that time, they come back and have another sit down with the youth pastor to say, how was it? What do you think? Questions. Is it a good fit for both of us? And then after that, then they become like a leader and they're going to be placed into like a group or a section in which to serve. And so, and I do all that because, if you have a good system set up, you could pour as many people into the auger as you want, because how you onboard people will weed out the people who shouldn't be there.
Yeah. And it just keeps going.
Yeah. And so that allows you then, once you have like the good onboarding system set up, and if you want, you could check it out. It's Download Youth Ministry, has all my stuff on it, and actually have our whole onboarding process on there.
Okay.
And
yeah,
so
we'll link to that.
like, yeah, it's tried and true. Like I've been using it for 10 years now, and it's been great. And, that allows then, once you have the system set, it takes time to build the machine. And once the machine's built, then you just got to oil it and kind of adjust things as things going. But then that allows you as the leader to spend the rest of your time recruiting and talking to people and getting them in the system. And how you do that, part of it, the staged call doesn't work anymore. You get the creepers usually. I want to work with kids. And then you're like, no. And
it's like, we need anybody to serve in youth, and then that's who you get. You get literally anybody instead of the right person.
And so, like for us, like what I there's a couple of things, thinking practical is, one, as a youth pastor or the youth lead at your campus, if you're running it, is you should have a couple back pocket stories of life change that you just have ready to go. That anytime that you're on stage, announcements, whatever, anytime you're in front of something or somebody, you could say, man, God's moving in this ministry. There's Cassidy who did this last week. She met Jesus and this was happened and this what happened to her family. Like you're able to cast vision of like what God is doing in your ministry at that moment. Hey, Kevin's on his third round of 7th grade to 12th grade guys. So he graduated 2 whole classes. He's on his third round now. And it's amazing to see what God's doing through him and his discipleship and his determination to disciple young men, stuff like that. So like we should always be having that in the back, because as you're talking to people, it's like, hey, come to my student ministry on Wednesdays. You should go ahead and like hang out and do. But like for you to say, hey, you should come join our ministry because God's moving. Let me tell you a couple stories. That is way more like impactful and engaging for somebody to come and join. The other part of it is I challenge leaders all the time. You invite people into with what you are excited for. Mm-hmm. If you're excited about something, people, your friends, what do? You bring them in on it. You got to check this out. Yep. And so leaders, are you excited? Leaders, do you like what's happening here? Because if you do, then you should be the biggest recruiter of this ministry.
That's right.
Like you've been there for 4 years. I've been here for 4 years. I'm tapped out on my personal connections of people asking people to come serve. When people see me walking down the hallway, they run because they know that I'm like, I'm going to make the pitch for them to come serve. But like all of our leaders have untapped circles And so it's like, man, are you excited about what God's doing here? You should be recruiting. And so we've done challenges like in our ministry, we do for our students like called Who's Your One? And the idea is like you should have every believer should have a non-believing student that they're invested into. It's already in their friend group that you're praying for, you're intentional with inviting them to the group, invite them to an event, invite them to church in hopes that they come to know who Jesus is and be baptized. We do the same thing with leaders. And we do like Who's Your One challenges with leaders. Who's the one person that is not serving, that should be serving, that you would want to serve with? Right? Bring them into your group, let them serve alongside you, and then recruit them and have them come. And it's been really good and effective and challenging for leaders to I'm not the sole recruiter. Like you guys are also the recruiter of it.
That's really good. We do something similar at our rally nights, which is our quarterly gathering and celebration and training time for our serve team. We just hand them a card and says, it's just got, a list of three little slots on the back. And it's like, hey, who are 3 people that that would be great at this? Like collectively, you all together know more people in our church than the staff does. So who do you know that would be phenomenal? And then the best part about that is when you talk about the system, man, let the system say yes or no for you. It's like one of the biggest mistakes I made early on was just begging people to serve and like really trying to work overtime to get them through the process. But let me release some tension for some of you listening or watching right now. If you have to handhold a leader through your system to just join your ministry and serve, they will not be at group. They will miss Wednesdays or whenever your midweek is. They're showing you who they are. So if they're consistent and they show up and they do the application and they go through all 4 weeks of your growth track, or they show up to whatever, then they're probably going to be a consistent leader. And if they never call you back, and if it's like pulling teeth to get them to show up for anything, it's going to be like that on a Wednesday night too. So the system is good because, like Justin's saying, it's scalable. You can pour as many people into it and it can handle it. But it's also good because it just identifies people along the way. And then once they get in, hopefully, if the system's designed well, you're getting the best, who are going to stick. And of course, you're going to get some duds and some weirdos and some people who just need the love of Jesus in their life, a little bit extra and a little bit more. But yeah, dude, I love all of that. How are you? Speak to this real quick. So you're onboarding them, you're gathering a group, shoulder tapped by other leaders. They're showing up, they're getting the one-on-one meeting, the background check, then a first look, and then 2 or 3 weeks of a first serve, which is really similar. We may have stole that from you. I don't know. It's really similar to what we do. And then from there, how do you turn that quantity leader into a quality leader through training? What do y'all do?
Yeah. So the couple of things that we do, and I challenge our team to do all the time with our leaders, again, super practical, is one, okay, you have to remember, they got through the system. Part of that onboarding process is the training. Here's what it means to win. Here's our 4 F's. Here's expectations, all that stuff. Post, now comes the 3, there's 3 things. We call it Connect Weekly, Gather Monthly, Train Quarterly. Connect Weekly, Gather Monthly, Train Quarterly. Weekly, the idea, depending how big your ministry is, how many, if you have a coach or a staff or whatever, like for us, we have like youth pastors, and then we have like high capacity volunteers that act as like coaches that like have a couple volunteers under them, right? Is we want to sit down one-on-one with every leader every 4 to 6 weeks. So lunch, coffee, between services, we want to have a regular rhythm of meeting. And in those regular rhythms of meeting, we ask those 3 questions that I mentioned before. How are you doing? How are you doing in your role? What can I do to make what you do better? And it just is it's a check-in. It allows them to give an update. You get to hear about their life. You share about your life. You get to hear a little bit how they're doing in their position and how they're doing as they're like onboarding. If there's any struggles, it allows in that moment too for feedback. Like, hey, remember, like I've seen you, the joke in our ministry is like, how many F's have you given? And so it's like, I've only seen you like do 2, like, where's like, have you hung out with that, Fellowship Plus? Have you hung out with any of your students yet outside of Wednesday nights? Maybe that's why you're struggling, not connecting. because you just got onboarded, you're 3 months in. Have you made any effort to hang out outside? Well, in the season, this is what I would challenge you to do. This is part of what a leader does. You haven't done it yet. Why don't you try it? And so it kind of allows that. And then again, like, hey, what can I do to make what you do better? Is my communication okay? Do you need me to call you out more? Like what's the deal? And so there's the connect weekly. That's that time. That's the regular check-in. That way you're not surprised if someone's like struggling, right?
Right.
In that sense. And then there's gather monthly. We tell leaders all the time, don't hang out with students on Wednesdays. Or I'm sorry, don't hang out with each other on Wednesdays. Hang out with students.
Yeah.
Stop talk. 10-foot rule. There's a 10-foot pole between you and every leader. Don't talk to anybody. But part of a good culture of a team is having fun together and spending time together as a team. And so for us, most of our campuses, they do like the last Wednesday of the month. We're all going to In-N-Out, just leaders. So once everything's cleaned up, let's just go hang. Let's have some food. There's no agenda. There's no training. But what naturally happens is that ministry talk happens. How was your group tonight? All that stuff. And it allows leaders to connect outside of Wednesdays. And then train quarterly. It's once a quarter. Actually, this year we tried something new. Is we actually had 4 Wednesday nights throughout the year that we canceled students coming to, but only leaders come to. Because leaders normally come on Wednesday nights anyway. So we're not asking an extra night for leaders, but we're saying, hey, students, we value leaders so much that we're actually going to have you guys as a group, going to encourage you guys to go do your own thing. But we're going to ask all the leaders to come and hang out with us on a Wednesday night. And then that's once a quarter where they're going to actually do like a training. And it could be on the 4 Fs. It could be on one of the Fs. Depending on what campus we have and what their need is, it's like, hey, you as a youth pastor, you could choose what you want, but let it be simple, let it be strategic, let it be practical. It's something that you need at your campus that you want to see better. Like I was just that one. I did a whole thing on follow-up. Like, why is follow-up important and what can we do to make that happen? So that's what we do to, like, as we go and continual training. That's what we do. And then we do like, a whole summer camp training day when summer camp comes around. And then typically in the fall, we'll do like an all family ministry training day with everybody. So that's awesome. Kind of what
that's incredible. Let's end on this idea. Let's wrap it up on this last thought. You've done all that. You've got them in, you're meeting with them weekly, gathering monthly, doing all the things, you're coaching them. Hey, you're yellow. Hey, you're green. Am I right on that? All those things. What do you do when you gotta let a leader go? How do you manage that? How do you let somebody go in grace and love and not create some big church blow up that lands in your senior pastor's email? How do you let people know that it's the right time to go and you do it in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, I've had all of the above: the good, the bad, the pastor, the email, the lawsuits, all the things that come along with that conversation to go. One, I think the important thing is to know is that it's your job as a leader to have those conversations. And if people are not doing what you need them to do, I would call it irresponsible of you as a leader to avoid those conversations. So I'll start with that. And I would say that you're also a coward in the sense of you're not leading in a way that I feel like God has called people to lead. I think it's actually way more hurtful to leave a bad leader in place than it is to have a conversation and just kind of rip the Band-Aid off. Yeah. Part of it is too, though, like you're talking about tact. If you don't have the regular systems of meeting up with and having check-ins, meaning like if the first time that you meet with somebody is when you onboard them and then the next time that you meet with them is when you offboard them, that's not good. That's when the blow up happens. That's like when like the hurt comes. I feel the best ways is when you have the regular systems of check-in with your leaders where you actually know them, you know what's going on in their life, you know when things are heavy, and depending on the situation, I could probably name 10 of, there was a nasty divorce going on, found out they were sleeping with, they were living with their boyfriend or girlfriend, found out that, they posted these really inappropriate things online, and, like, name it, done it, had the conversation. Wow, you spread rumors, and you're actually more divisive than you are unifying, right? All of those. I think all of it comes down to, you could do your job as a leader is to have the candid conversation with love and grace. Jesus always had towed the line between grace and truth, is to be honest. Don't beat around the bush. Hey, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what, based off our conversations, here's what I got. If it's a high capacity volunteer, maybe someone that you think is going to bring the fire, I would let my supervisor know, hey, I'm going to have this hard conversation. I don't want you to be caught off guard if they come to you. Here's all the reasons why, have all those necessary conversations. And then I always do like you can never serve here again. That's never like my language, even if that's what I want. It's more of like, hey, I think we need to take a break. I would love right now, I'm going to ask you to take a 6-month break. And I would still love to be in contact with you while we do. List all the reasons. I care for you. I know there's a lot going on. Hey, you made a mistake, whatever. Like, list all those things that you're why. So there's no discrepancy. And I would say too, if you're really worried, have a third person in the meeting, right? Like, so that way it's not a he said, she said thing. Keeps people accountable. And I would just go like, hey, in 6 months, I would love to sit down with you. I'd love to take you out to lunch. Let's readdress where you're at. Let's see if this is something you still want to do. Because, most of the time as they offboard, they also are realizing this is not what I want to do anymore. And they usually try to find other places to serve anyways. That's better for them. And you kind of just walked as gracefully and as strategically as you can through that conversation. I'll end with this. That is, you could make sure that you do your job as a leader to love and care for and challenge leaders as Jesus does. You are not responsible for their reaction to said decision. Yeah, because some of them might be, okay, got it, and then they're going to trash you once they leave. Some will be super mad in the meeting, and that's going to be fun. Some of them will go directly to your supervisor, and some of them will also go, you know what, I think you're right. I think I do need a break. I need to step out for a season. And depending on who they are and what they're going through, then that's great. You could make sure that you have your process set, and that it's tactful, it's loving, but also filled with truth of why.
Yeah. No, man, that's gold, and super practical, super simple, all things that are going to help lead to the scale and the growth of your ministry. Justin, thanks so much for being on the podcast. And thank y'all for listening. I hope that today's episode surrounding leaders and quantity and quality and recruiting and coaching and confronting and all the things help you lead in a more simple, strategic way that leads your ministry to scalable growth. Thanks so much for listening. We can't wait to see you guys for our next episode. See you later.